Now gold is not in her. She's a dime.
Welcome to another wonderful edition of the $1 Million Peddlers. I'm Papergoy. Today, we're going to talk about legacy. What is legacy, you ask? Well, that's another way of saying stuff. Just stuff that happened in the past, and it's just there. And there's a lot of different reasons why you get into legacy, but if you've been listening on eBay for a long time, you've got problems. I know I've said any number of times, and I know Mr-Magazine has said any number of times, we wish someone would come along, make us a fair offer for our stores, buy us out, and let us start again. And we would do it differently this time because we've got the legacy. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for that. We've changed how we list things. As I've mentioned in a previous video, I take the time now to sell my items instead of trying to have them sell themselves. I didn't always do that. So now I scan the table of contents. You look at a listing of mine from 3 or 4 years ago, I don't have the table of contents scanned. The pictures throughout the years have deteriorated. They've gotten lost on the various eBay servers. Whatever happens, they're not there, or they're not good. At one time, I was using cameras and taking pictures in a hurry, and some of the pictures were blurry, and there's still probably a couple of them up there. I've since purchased the Caesar scanner, as we've talked about, and that really helps. That helps with the oversized things. But most of my oversized things were listed prior to my having that, so they're all cut off. They do not show the entire cover, whereas now they do. So poor pictures, I've definitely got those throughout. Back in the day, eBay did not have the condition box up top. You just would put the condition down in the middle of your listing. Now there's the condition box. So some of my older listings do not have anything in there. It's not because I don't want to use it, it's because it wasn't there. eBay will change categories throughout the years. Well, I have it listed in a category. They do away with that category. It just kind of defaults into some general type category. It's not the best category for it anymore. But it was at the time that I listed it, but things have changed. I go back to the days when you could actually solicit for cash on eBay. And I would say that I would accept checks, money orders, cash, whatever. I didn't really care. I was just trying to make the sale. It was actually a terrible thing had happened. eBay then outlawed the use of cash, and this was before the days of bulk edit. You actually had to download all of your items on a slow connection and try to amend them and try to put them all back up, and I lost hundreds of listings at that time because I wasn't able to do it. And that's one reason why, if you take a look at my listings nowadays, it says basically nothing within the listing, because throughout time they change. eBay changes what they'll allow. At one point they allowed links. At one point they allowed you to say you were a member of the Power Seller Club. So I used to say I was a gold power seller. Now you're not allowed to do that anymore, and my listings that said that got flagged. I got sick of them changing the rules after the fact, and as such, I don't say very much in the description. I just simply don't, and that's the reason why. The return policy. I may have an item or two that has a 7-day return policy because that used to be allowed. There's just so many other places that they've sat there and they've changed throughout the years. Calculated shipping I didn't used to use, now I do. Some of my early listings that are still up, a couple of them still have flat listing for overseas. It's not really worth my time trying to find where they are, and occasionally I'll make a sale and I'll lose money on it, and I say, geez, I wish I had known, I would have changed that. But it's just kind of a cost of doing business. But those are all examples of legacy, from the pictures to the titles, because I didn't think to list something, or I used to list the December 1984 Vogue magazine. I would put the December 1984 first, because that was back before there was a big understanding of how Google did the search and all that sort of thing. Of course, you want to put the keywords up first. Back 10, 12 years ago, I wasn't aware of that, so I would say December 1984 as opposed to Vogue, and all sorts of things like that. And as time goes on and we keep improving, we're still stuck with the old stuff. I could sit down and spend months revising all of the old stuff, but I got so much new stuff to list, and I'm more excited about listing the new stuff that I just tend to plow forward, but I'm still stuck with the legacy from before. And I was really thinking about this because I was watching The Auction Professor on Patreon looking at various people's stores, and I am certain that if he were to review my store, he would tear it apart. And again, the reason why is because of legacy, because of various things that I did in the past, most of which were, if not best practices, certainly acceptable back at the past, and I just have not had the time or taken the time to revise all of those items. So you're starting out and you're saying, what's that going to do for me? I've got 17 items listed. What is this legacy you're talking about? Just realize that if you are small and you do not have a lot of listings, if eBay goes and makes a change, you are in a great position to go back through and change all your items. Add the change, add whatever you learn to your items. That way you can stay on top of it and you're not just stuck with hundreds of items that probably won't sell or would need a fair amount of revision to be able to sell. I'm certainly in that boat. Mr-Magazine is certainly in that boat, and many old-time sellers are definitely in that boat. They've got items that are just sitting there that need a lot of work in order to sell, but just they never make the time in order to sell them. I know I certainly don't. Poor pictures. I mean, way back in the day, eBay was difficult. It was difficult to crop pictures. So I've got various pictures that have way too much background on them. Why? Because you couldn't really crop it back in the day easily. So I didn't. I just listed it. You may also change how you're selling things. As I said, I used to be more of a volume seller. Now I'm more of a quality seller. A whole different way of listing between the two. And I've got the old stuff that was listed when I was more of a volume seller. I'm not going to take the time to go back and change it all. So I just hope that they sell off, and through attrition things get better and my newer listings are much better. So if you've been on for a while, maybe take a little bit of time. I mean, I did a couple of years ago, I did take some time and revise a lot of items and rebox a lot of items, change pictures on a lot of items and all that sort of thing. And believe it or not, my sales did not suffer. They pretty much stayed where they were, because when you make those revisions to the items, you change the picture, you change the title, all that sort of thing, eBay kind of views them as new and they get pushed up in the search results. That's one thing that ends up happening if you do have a lot of listings, is things end up stagnating and they end up falling down a lot further in the search results, because eBay looks at it and says, geez, this hasn't had a sale in 3 years, it must not be top quality, and then people aren't necessarily going to find it, especially if you've got things, Newsweek magazine, Time magazines, things like that a lot of other people have. So every once in a while I do try to go through and revise things. A little trick that I've learned that maybe you could do as well is, if I have the item and somebody asks me a question on it and I have to go and find the item in order to answer the question, I revise the listing while I'm in there. Figure that way at the very least it'll move it up some in the search, and it needs to be revised anyway, so it's a good time to do it, because I'm looking at the item anyway. Might as well make sure the picture is good, might as well make sure the description is good, etc., etc. And surprisingly, a lot of times that ends up selling the item, which is very, very good. So if you've been listing for a long time, every once in a while take a little bit of time, look through your oldest listings, perhaps end them, perhaps they're not going to sell. I know Mr. Magazine does that regularly. He ends a lot of listings and he gets them relisted, because he'll go through a box and say, this has been listed for 6 years. This stuff is halfway decent. Why hasn't it sold? And he'll end them and then he'll just relist them. You can go and you can revise items every once in a while. Find a box that you've had in the corner that you haven't gotten anything out of to pack for a while, and take the time to go and revise it. And you'll probably say, oh my goodness gracious, I see why it didn't sell. That the picture's not there anymore, or whatever the case happens to be. And you'll be surprised, you'll end up making some sales out of it. And if you're just starting out new, take the time to revise if you can, and take the time to understand that every time eBay makes a change, whether it's the length of returns, whether it's the calculated shipping, whether it's the condition box, whether it's getting rid of categories, whatever changes they happen to make, it's going to affect you in some manner as well going forward. And if you don't have a lot of listings, revise them And if you do, just be aware that that's changed. Now, some of the things like return policy and the like, you can go and you can do bulk edit. So every once in a while, when I'm got a little extra time on my hands, I'll go through and I'll bulk edit items and make sure that it does have the correct return and all that sort of thing. Another area that if you're selling sports cards or comic books for that matter, they require manufacturer on the comic books and on the sports cards, that sort of thing. They didn't used to do that. Well, all of a sudden, a lot of comics I had were flagged because I didn't say it was by Marvel Comics or I didn't say it was by DC Comics. Why not? Because it wasn't required. You didn't need to have to do that. Now you do. So a lot of times eBay will flag things for you and let you know it needs to be changed. But there's also nothing more discouraging than sitting down, getting ready to list, and suddenly seeing you have 125 items that you need to revise. That's very discouraging. Usually what I do at that point is, knock 5 to 10 off a day and figure I'll get them done in a week or two. So a couple of weeks. So just letting you know legacy is a real thing. And it explains a lot of the poor listings you see by various dealers that otherwise should know better and do know better now. So, till next time, stay safe.